Good morning, everyone. So thank you for everyone being here. It's very fitting that we're going to have a press conference with the mayor of Wilmington and myself right after Compstat, because Compstat is one of the methodologies that we've brought into Wilmington. It's been successful in other cities that helps us look at crime, analyze crime, and then we have plans to deal with it, and it kind of guides us. And one thing about Compstat, it's really not outputs, it's about outcomes. And I think because of these methodologies have been brought in, the good work from our police officers and our local, state, and federal partners in the Attorney General's office and the U.S. Attorney's office, we're having successes in 2018. But I call it progress, because that's what it is, progress, because we've got so much more work to do. But before we get into some of the numbers and talk about the numbers today, I'd love to introduce the Honorable Mayor Michael Pizicki, leader of our city. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Morning, everyone. We're here today to talk about a remarkable year in reducing crime in Wilmington, and I think it's appropriate to give some perspective to this. In January 2017, when I took office, the single most pressing and defining issue in the city was gun violence, more specifically homicides. More pointedly, in my first 4 days in office, we had 3 homicides. When we forgot about the seriousness of crime, the news media reminded us that ours is a very dangerous city. And we had residents and businesses alike so deeply concerned they talked about leaving. Indeed, some did leave the city. Our city had lost its self-confidence. And so the most important mission for me upon taking office was to restore the public's confidence in our government, to restore a sense of order, to reduce crime and redefine our city in the minds of our citizens. I made a decision very early to look outside the department for leadership and hire a chief with decades of experience in New York City and Chicago. And this decision to hire Bob Tracy has been entirely vindicated. Bob has proven to be all that I hoped he would be as chief of our department. I'm going to let the chief talk about specifics a bit. In a word, he will announce that violent crime has dropped dramatically in the city of Wilmington. He's going to review many of the statistical milestones achieved by the department, and he's going to highlight the plummeting violent crime statistics. But what I want us all to remember is that for every reduced shooting victim, one less family endured the agony of personal loss. Every prevented act of violence represents one less traumatic experience that our neighborhood children will have to endure. Every reduction in the number of shooting victims is one less nerve-rattling experience that our neighbors fear for their own safety. The statistics aren't simple metrics. They have a profound consequence and affect the quality of existence on our city. Most notable from my point of view is that while violent crime is down, complaints about our police officers are down as well. This, I believe, is because our officers are out of their cars and engaging the public as never before. This culture of engagement embraced by the men and women of our department has built profoundly important bridges in our communities. As evidence, homicide clearance rates are up significantly over prior years, above national averages and far above our national urban centers as well. And we've performed this, notably, Chief, without any increase in police overtime. There are people who need to be recognized. First and foremost are the rank and file of this department, whose diligence and courage are the indispensable factors in our success. I can't express how proud I am to stand before the men and women of this department and express my admiration and gratitude for the remarkable performance over these past 18 months. Second are the citizens of our city whose engagement and cooperation with our efforts have resulted in better community relations, better communications, and assistance in solving crimes. Last are the members of our fellow public safety and law enforcement community agencies, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office, the ATF, and state and county police departments whose support and cooperation are essential to our city's success. Don't anybody think that I, or the chief for that matter, take this success for granted. Although we're optimistic and confident in our strategies, we must be realistic about the problems our communities still have, and we have to remain vigilant. The rest of government has a role to play in building our neighborhoods and strengthening our neighbors. We're not celebrating success today, but rather remarkable progress in pursuit of a goal of being counted among America's finest and safest cities. We can't forget what got us here: sound strategies, hard work, and perseverance. To the chief, the command staff, and to our officers, as your mayor, I am very proud. And as a resident, I am very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for those words and the support that you give us each and every day, not just the police department, but all the city agencies, because they play a big role in what we're trying to do, because it's a holistic effort of how we're getting to where we need to be. And especially you take a look at West Center City, and when you take a look at some of the statistics that you see in West Center City, that you can break out from our Compstat reports. They're put up on a weekly basis and 2 weeks after the closing date. And then also Crime View, which is also up on our public website, to have transparency where we work with the community to be good partners and try to reduce crime. But a lot of the credit also goes to some of the individuals, and mostly all the individuals in the Wilmington Police Department. And it really starts with the leadership here. And with me here up on stage, we have Inspector Cecilia Ash, who's the head of our investigative operations, and Inspector Chuck Emery, who's the head of our uniform operations. So it starts with them, and then with the command staff that some of you filmed today, that we do weekly Compstat meetings, that we're in here answering questions, being accountable, driving down the methods and strategies, and being there engaged with our law enforcement officers all the way through the ranks, down to the officers that are on the beat, who are the backbone of why we're getting things done. They are the backbone of why we are here today talking about progress. Because the things that our officers do on the street, they're the front end of our business. And we're there doing the things right, and we still got to get better at it, and we're going to institutionalize these things that we're doing as they do their job up front with community engagement, respect to the community, police legitimacy, procedural justice, solving crimes, treating people fairly, going to community meetings, making those relationships. All these strategies, excuse me, they're not going to matter, and we're not going to sustain them without that community engagement. And that was one of the tenets of when I came in, talking to the mayor. That's what we have to do and establish. First, to build trust where we've had it, and then establish trust where we haven't. And that's what we're trying to do. And we got to work on it each and every day. That is not something that comes easily, because there's been things that we've done in the past that sometimes we've earned some of that distrust. We're looking to turn that around, and we're going to do that each and every day. As you can see, you look at some of the numbers, how we finished this year. You look at 115 less shooting victims. The mayor touched on it. That's 115 less people that are not dealing with crisis or something else, or might end up in the death, and they're dealing with that type of grief. But still, at the numbers that we're at, still too many. Still too many. And we have to find ways, working with our elected officials, working with our prosecutors, working with our judicial partners, and also working with the community and most of these programs and businesses. We're going to work together. We're going to look holistically and see how we can improve the lives of our citizens, try to get them out of the life of crime. And we have some proven methods that we're moving forward with. We look at focused deterrence. We look at David Kennedy's work, a national network of safe communities. We look at group violence intervention. So when we're looking at these individuals, the highest propensity for violence, we not only look at them if they're going to cause carnage in the community to make sure that we address them, we also look at them to try to get them the help, to get them out of that life of crime. Because how did they get there? We'll try to get to the root cause and try to get them out of that crime. And those are the things that you look at in progressive policing, and some of the things that we need to do and need to change the way we do things. Our goal is not the amount of arrests that we make. Our goal is, are we reducing crime? And some of the measurements in policing that have happened in the past is, how many arrests did you make? Officer, how many guns did you get off the street? Officer, how many summonses did you give? Well, That measurement is somewhat there, but it shouldn't be the measurement we should really look at as a priority. The measurement we see is keeping the same officers in the same area every time they work. So they have ownership of that area, they establish that trust. And I measure my officers on how much the crime is going down. If an officer came in with no arrests, but there was no crime, that is a success story. That is a success story. And that's where we really want to be. So you can see the numbers up here. The clearance rates, that's huge. That's closure to families that have had family members that are victim of homicides. And when you do that, you bring closure to the families. But we don't get there by ourselves. Usually the communities have the best clearance rates is very good detectives, which we do have. But it's community cooperation and trust that starts to show those numbers where they start to go up. They don't have to go to trial, but they're starting to point us in the right direction with anonymous calls. And in the relationships we have in the community is now that the first time we show up at a shooting or a murder, that's not the first time we had a conversation with the community. This is the first we've had it, we've established it, and then they know us. And they're going to give us the information because they don't want this to happen in their community either. Another thing where you measure community trust, not just with clearance rates, it's the complaints against our officers. If you take a look here, we're down almost, where are we over here? It wouldn't fit. So we're down over 30% with our officers. That means we're working together. That means the trust is being built. And, you know, we still got to work on it. But it's progress. I continue to talk about progress going in the right direction. And then you look at the shooting victims, and you also look at the shooting incidents and the gun homicides and where they're coming down. This is the beginning. I've been in places where they said it couldn't be done. I've been in places like New York, where in the early 90s, where I've worked in neighborhoods where they said it couldn't be done. And we've worked together to where it's the safest city in the United States, 8 million people with 297 homicides last year. That's incredible. But it happened incrementally from the years when they started putting these methodologies that we're doing here in Wilmington, and then it took off, and then organically it grew, and then everybody came aboard, and the validation of the numbers are there. And that's where we really need to be. That's where I'm going to strive to be with the mayor's leadership and his guidance. You know, that's where it all starts. It's the mayor that gets this whole thing going, including myself, to make sure he has the confidence in us and gives us the tools to get the job done. So I couldn't be more fortunate to be in this role. I do not take it for granted, but I have to give a lot of credit and mostly all the credit to the hard work that's done by our police officers and our partners, federal, state, and local partners and prosecutors each and every day, and our other units and departments in the city and the leadership of Wilmington. So I think we can open it up for questions at this time. Thank you.
You know, are you guys just surprised yourselves by how rapidly it's fallen? Did you really expect to be sitting up here, you know, at this time, doing these numbers?
I'll start answering this because this question was posed to us last year. At the end of the year, we had historically high numbers. We came in a transition earlier in the year in 2017. There was some high shootings, murders, violent crime. And one of the things, coming in as a new police chief and coming in as a new mayor, coming into the city, when I was interviewed, I said, Mayor, this is going to take time. What I do need, and if you choose me as your chief, can you give me the cover and the patience, which is very difficult for mayors to do because they are 4-year cycles. And I said, Mayor, if you give us the time, these methodologies, if we put them, first we have to educate our officers, we got to implement it, we got to execute it right, and then we got to follow up. Mayor, it's not going to happen overnight, but please, if you give us cover, which the mayor did to his credit, because that's a difficult thing to do for elected officials. I've worked in two other cities, and given that time, the News Journal had asked me that question. When is this going to start to turn? But at that time, we were already starting to see results in November and December. I said, do you really want to give me a mark on when we should start seeing a turn? In my experience, and the way I see things that it was going as far as the reductions in some of these most violent areas and how my officers are responding to Compstat and learning the system, I said around the 1-year mark, which would have been April of 2018, hopefully we'll be there. If we get there earlier, that's great. A little time after that, but that should be the year mark in a city of this size. And that came to fruition, and that's where we are. Now we got to sustain it, we got to institutionalize it, and then we got to build off some of this progress. So I hope I answered it for you, Mayor, if you want to follow up with that question.
Yeah, I would just, I'm not certain that I could say that I was surprised of the success. I will tell you that the more surprising thing is to understand the violence itself. I mean, for someone who's didn't live a sequestered life, I still found myself shocked, surprised by the indifference people have toward harming one another. And I think that's the harder thing to get your head around. And I think and people in our positions have to understand exactly what promotes this, what gives rise to this kind of violence. That's the more important thing. And so for us, it is a constant effort to try to reduce the environment which gives rise to this violence. And so surprised, I don't necessarily think I'm surprised that we're getting good results. Obviously very pleased with it though.
Chief, if we could ask a couple questions about how the officers are doing from yesterday's incident. I understand there was a release that they were expected to get out of the hospital. Can you talk to us how the officers are doing from yesterday's incident?
Can we just finish up on some of these crime strategies? If anybody else has some questions, I'd be happy to answer some of those questions. It's a very important question, and I will get to that, but I'd like to stay focused on this, and then I knew we would probably go to those questions. Okay.
Chief Tracy, you both mentioned that, this isn't ultimate success, this is progress, and you said some of the stuff is just institutionalizing new policies over the next year. Is there anything, things you want to tweak or alterations you're going to make after this past year's experience?
Every day we're tweaking. If you see what's happening in Compstat, we get better at it. We bring partners in. We have some conflicts that are going back and forth between individuals that live outside the city, in the county, and inside the city. So we expand our intelligence that we always share, but we work in cooperation. How do we reduce this crime? So we're learning with intelligence meetings. There's some things that we're going to overlay. I talked about the gang violence intervention, where we'll start having these group call-ins. So we're building a good foundation of where we need to be, and then we continue to add evidence-based strategies. If you did it all in the beginning, you're going to set yourself up to fail. There was things that needed to be changed internally in this police department before we had external successes, and that's exactly where we're at. And we're always going to look to improve. I talked about New York, 25 years of doing Compstat. That Compstat that they started out 25 years ago, when I already had 10 years in the NYPD, they've evolved, and they had to adapt and change and look for better ways to do it. They grew with technology. These things, it's not cookie-cutter approach. You got to make sure you continue to look at best practices nationally. I talk to my colleagues throughout the United States. I do a phone call once or twice a week with people that I trust, some of them my mentors, some of my counterparts, and say, hey, I'm looking to try to do this. How does this work? I look at academics. I look to Police Executive Research Forum. I look to Chuck Wexel. I look to David Kennedy. I look to Andrew Papachristos in social network analysis. I look to all these individuals to see how we can improve, and every day we're looking to add things. So to answer your question, we have to institutionalize the really good basics and then build off of that.
And within the different policing districts, some saw greater decreases than others. So I'm wondering if there are particular places you could point to say, we had the best success here. This is on the to-do list for next year in terms of like a focused geographic area.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, they've all had successes in progress when it came to shootings. If you look at the statistical sheet, we even have one neighborhood, Southbridge, that had no shootings for the whole year, versus 8. And coming to a neighborhood like that, even that's where I might be surprised. That would it be 0 shootings this year? But I'm not surprised that we would reduce it because of the good work and what we're doing, and we're following the plan. But coming 0, I mean, that's where you want to be. 0 people shot in that community, and even monitoring ShotSpotter, the amount of ShotSpotter incidents throughout the city are going down as well. So a lot what we're doing. Can I point to West Center City? If you go and take a look at the successes that are happening there. This is where the mayor really talked about, let's look at a smaller area instead of looking at the city, and let's put things together as a pilot program with all our city services infused. Everybody's on board, U.S. Attorney, Attorney General, our city services, garbage pickup, going after the bad landlords, making sure that we prop up communities and make sure they have their own civic association. That's having dramatic successes for a place that promises have been made in the past, but we've never sustained them. But that's the promise the mayor is making in the police department to make sure, and plus our other city agencies, we're here, we're with you, and we're going to do this with you until such time we're going to continue to stay with you, but we want to make sure that your community is giving back to you, and you prop yourselves up just like a lot of the other communities that have good civic associations, and we're helping them do that. Those are things. You can go to Southbridge, you can go to Browntown, you can take a look at the successes that are happening there. But each community, why we break it down into districts, each community has a uniqueness to it. And that's why we go to community meetings, and that's why we look at them individually. So we didn't even, when you were here looking at some things, I looked at the sector overall, but within those sectors, there's 3 districts in District 3. Each one has it, and each community is different. I also always talk about, I got to say this right, the Highlands. When you take a look at my Bronx accent sometimes butchers a lot of these neighborhoods, and especially how I pronounce them. At the Highlands, when we first came in, I went to my first community meeting up in the Highlands, and we looked at it. We were up 62% in crime, but it was mostly all property crime. What are they really? They're not seeing the type of violent crime. But it was my first meeting, and they say, we have all these issues. And I brought Captain Curtin with me, who is the sector commander. And I said, this is my first meeting. I get to pull this out of my back pocket. I just got here, and I just have to work on it. I can't do that anymore, and rightfully so. But I said, we will work on the conditions, and this type of methodology will look at all crimes, look at patterns, time of day, day of week, and we'll have strategies go forward from our commander, who will be the quarterback of community policing, to make sure we get that done. That was in April of 2017. By the time we got to the end of the year, we were in a negative. And then by the time we look at 2018, we continued that trend down to, I think, almost 25% reduction in crime. I haven't looked at that since yesterday, so bear with me on that. I don't have it in front of me, but I know there's been a continued reduction of crime in this methodology.
When you mentioned the number of community meetings that the officers go to.
So we have 48 civic associations, hopefully now with the West Center City Civic Association that's been propped up, and we're supporting, and they're doing a great job. But we go to every single civic association meeting here. And it's on our schedule, and it's part of the metrics that we measure and we talk about each and every day. So if they're having that several times a year, I don't have the exact number, Mayor, but we can multiply that by having a meeting.
308.
308, thank you, John. And so it's over 308 civic associations. We are going to be there. We're going to be there with our captain that covers the area, and the officer that works the same district. Every time that they go out, we'll be at that meeting to hear their concerns so we can address them properly, because it's not just the intelligence-led policing where we're starting to do a really good job at, but it's what the community wants and where they want us. And that's why you have directed patrols in between calls for service that we can balance, where we can get officers out on foot posts. They can walk their foot posts, put their hats on, interact with the community, and address the concerns that they have.
If there is a dark cloud, it's that aggravated assaults have gone up, and I think car thefts have gone up, but the aggravated assaults are still serious violence.
Yes.
Are they just exchanging a firearm for a club or a knife, or just beating the heck out of somebody?
I think as
how concerned about that are you?
I'm very concerned when anybody, this is part of one of the Part 1 violent crimes, assaults. What we see is a lot is domestics. You start to see those domestics, and we have to see how we can get in front of them. We have a domestic violence unit within our detectives, and we also have special victims and victim services. We're a very fortunate agency that I didn't have this in other agencies. It was a satellite office, but within the Wilmington Police Department, we have individuals from victim services that are civilians, and they're trained in this, that can go out and help these families when we see these things happen. So they're working in conjunction. They sit at Compstat with us as well. Am I concerned? Always when I see a number starting to trend upward. You would hope that if the amount of shootings are going down, right, because that's an aggravated assault, when they're going down, we just take them out. We extrapolate them out, but still keep them in the full number when we do shootings. That would go down. So yes, that does concern me, but we review every case in Compstat. I go through, today I couldn't do it because of what we're doing today, but we go through every single aggravated assault to see how we could have prevented it, how we can make the arrest, and then talk with victim services if that's a repeat or somewhere it's domestic violence happening, how we can get in front of it and give that family help. So it is a concern, and that's why we measure it, and it's definitely a concern of us.
Mayor, besides talking to people like us, how do you make sure that as people outside the city know these statistics are changing, know that the city's becoming safer, and what benefit does that have for us in the long term?
Yeah, it's really, really important to us, because I think that, as I indicated back 3, 4, 5 years ago, this reputation we had for violence really got way outside our borders. And so, among other things, we've got a branding and marketing campaign that we've started back about 3 or 4 months ago. It'll be in full force pretty soon. And it basically rebrands our city and tells everybody what's really great about the city and tries to put whatever violence we have in a proper perspective. I'm always amazed when people come to visit us, or I guess I'm pleasantly surprised how amazed people are at what a really great city Wilmington is. But people walk in with a preconception that is just, it's been born of this reputation for violence that we've had over the past 5 years. But when they come here, they're just so impressed with what a healthy and attractive city it is. But let me just say another, I want to reiterate a point that I made back when Chris asked the question of the chief. Aggravated assaults are born out of neighborhoods where you've got too much poverty, too much stress, too much social dysfunction. We can't keep asking our police officers to deal with that any more than we can ask our teachers to deal with all the problems that our kids have. And so we've got to be a big part of the solution. And the big public policy question for me and for the governor and for our state representatives is what we do to create a nurturing environment for our kids to grow up in. Our kids grow up in terrible, terrible conditions in some places. We have tried to change the game on being able to get our landlords to really up their game so that the places these kids live in is a much, much more positive environment. You've got to understand what it's like to be a child in neighborhoods where you've got burned down homes and crime everywhere, and then you walk into a house that is just the definition of blight right in your own quarters. And so one of our highest objectives is to get council to agree with us to make this a priority so that we can really hold our landlords to a higher standard. And I think they're all the things that we do here, change this story. I think if we can continue this, this old murder town moniker changes to turnaround town. And that's what I think we're hoping to see happen.
Chief, can you talk to us a little bit why the shootings on the north side of the city are still, that area still has the most of them?
They're still going down if you see the amount. So there's progress because that's, it's been entrenched. It's been a situation that happens up there. There's conflicts going around, a couple of groups that are going on, certain areas that they think is theirs and they own. Well, no, the community owns it, the city owns it, and we, the citizens, have those areas. So I'm not going to let them confuse that they own anything. But between those conflicts, we've been getting in front of them. We've been making some substantial arrests and strides in the ones that are committing the violence. And we talked about it earlier before all the press was in Compstat. I started out with Sector 1. And there's been progress in the shootings. And then where we have a city that's 90% of murders are by gunshot, if you reduce the shootings, the murders will start to come down. It is a priority of ours. We take a look at that. We've made progress at it, but we still got a lot more work to do, and we continue to. I think the next things that we're overlaying some of these things with group violence intervention and some of these call-ins is going to help us get to where we need to be. And opportunity for the individuals are up there. The mayor hit on these things that, there has to be opportunity. We have to help people from reoffending. We have to make sure that we can help them be a productive member of society. So even some of them that are re-entering in that area, we've got a high concentration of individuals re-entering that have been incarcerated. So what are we doing to help them get on their way? Are we doing the right training programs? Are we setting them up to succeed instead of the system setting them up to fail when they come out and going back to what they used to do and going right back into the violence that got them into jail to begin with? So we have to do this holistically. This we can continue to do, but we're going to look at those things, and we always do, Adam.
Are we finding new groups forming as older groups are being, I don't know if dismantled is the right word, but are these groups that you're talking about, are they mostly old and prevalent groups, or are new ones forming as you work against the old ones?
Well, I heard that question the other day. Of course you're going to lose some kids as they get older, and then they're going to look to some of these social networks in these groups for some validation that they might be missing in other parts of their lives, right? So yes, there's potential for them to get up there. But when you take shootings as a whole and who the shooting victims and the shooters are, they're mostly in their 20s. the thing is that often when we see someone that's a juvenile as a shooter, it's very shocking, and we think it's happening more than it really is. We got to do things better within schools. We got to do things better in far and getting in front of these things, and that's why we look at the CDC. We look at the trauma that's caused these children. Get to them when they start to become high risk. And right now, we're working with some juveniles. We discussed it earlier. I couldn't discuss in here. Can't discuss who they are. But we talked about 5 different juveniles today in Compstat. How do we get in front of them, working with probation, parole, with our commissioners and the juvenile courts, working with the Department of Family Support Services and Juvenile Support Services? How can we get to this individual? And we monitor them, not so much to incarcerate them, to keep them safe and keep them from committing other crimes, and try to get them sent right back on the right track and get to them earlier, before they graduate to an adult, because then they're really going to do some real time.